A burst of intense metal tearing and the screeching tire noise overwhelmed me, and my consciousness sank into eternal cold. The last moment of my previous life was the red light of the dashboard blinking frantically, and Linda's almost insane cold laugh on the other end of the phone. She used the top sports car I lent her for free to carve out a reputation as a top eldest daughter in the social circle, then teamed up with a black-hearted agency to frame me. Not only did they drain the liquid assets of my family trust, but they also tampered with the car's braking system by adding scaffolding, causing my death on the winding mountain road at the edge of a cliff. But when I opened my eyes again, there was no icy hospital nor a furnace of flames. Instead, a familiar, sharp laugh reached my ears. This Koenigsegg is a worldwide limited edition of 3. My dad specially shipped it directly from Europe to celebrate my 20th birthday. In a few days the car will arrive, and I'll take you all to the track to set lap times. I sat bolt upright, my nails digging deep into the soft lining of the genuine leather seat. The scene in front of me was incredibly clear. This was the top-floor club lounge of St. Jack College, afternoon sunlight spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows and shining on Linda's face, who was sitting in the center of the sofa, surrounded by people. She wore a high-fashion dress, a dazzling diamond ring on her finger, boasting about a photo of a supercar on her phone. I lowered my head to check the date on my phone, and my heart began to race. Reset. Time rewound to 2 years ago, before any tragedy had begun. At this moment in my previous life, driven by blind trust in a friend, I watched her flaunt a car that didn't belong to her in the class social circle. Even when someone questioned it, I naively stepped in to help her cover it up. When she asked to borrow a car to attend a top-tier socialite party, I didn't hesitate to hand over the keys to my own car. My concessions and indulgence ultimately became the chips she used to push me into an endless abyss. This time, I look at her face, filled with vanity and greed, and a cold glint edges my lips. "Chloe, come over and take a look." Linda seemed to notice my gaze and waved me over, wearing that hypocritical, endearing smile. "You aren't usually into researching cars? What do you think of the Koenigsegg my dad gave me? Is it much better than the old models in your garage?" Several classmates eager to curry favor with her immediately chimed in, no doubt about it. Linda's family is a multinational financial giant. Buying a car is money ordinary people can't earn in their lifetimes. Exactly. Chloe, while your family has a little money, compared with Linda, you're like a child compared to a grown-up. I stood up quietly, slowly walked to Linda, and looked at the photo on the phone screen. It clearly showed the titanium silver supercar I personally ordered from the Sweden factory 3 years ago, currently parked in my private garage. In the background of the photo, I could faintly see the sycamore leaves in the yard of my family estate. In the previous life, she secretly posted a photo of my garage on social media, creating momentum by claiming it as her asset, and I, due to so-called friendship, chose to remain silent. "Indeed, it's a fine car," I spoke with a calm, unruffled voice, "but the titanium alloy wheels on this car are an exclusive custom design. Only the owner with the number 01 globally can own them. Linda, as far as I know, the car's ownership registration certificate was only delivered to a notary in New York last week, and the owner's name doesn't seem to be your father's surname. Does it?" Linda's smile froze on her face in an instant, and a flash of extreme panic flickered in her eyes, but she quickly hid it, speaking louder. "Chloe, what do you mean by this? Do you think my dad buying a car would fool me? As for the deed, of course my family has a butler to keep it safely. Do I need to report to you about it? I'm just giving a friendly reminder." I shrugged lightly, a cold hauteur in my eyes. After all, there are too many people nowadays who pretend to be wealthy and use fictitious assets to make money on social networks. If the car can't be produced at that time, it won't end well. The surrounding air instantly thickened a few degrees. Several classmates who had been circling Linda looked at each other with a trace of doubt in their eyes. Linda's face shaded from pale to pale blue. She stared at me and clenched her hands tightly into fists on her lap. She completely couldn't understand why Chloe, who usually had a temper, who was usually compliant with her, would suddenly become so sharp today. What she didn't know was that I am no longer the fool who could be easily manipulated. From this second, the tall tower built with lies would be demolished brick by me. I would not lend her even a single cent or a car again. I want to watch with my own eyes as she is exposed for her wealth-flashing lies and steps, step by step, toward an abyss from which there is no return. I didn't give her a chance to argue anymore, and I turned around and walked straight out of the lounge. Taking out my phone, I dialed the head of the family legal team and the private asset security consultant. In my previous life, she covertly collected my personal information and forged asset certificates. This life I will reverse all of it and use it against her. Help me check all bank accounts and recent transactions under Linda's name. And that so-called cross-border investment company. I gave the command calmly over the phone. Also, file the ownership certificates of all my vehicles and properties for judicial retention, log all access to my private garage. From now on, not a single fly will be able to approach my cars without my authorization. After hanging up, I looked out at the clear sky through the window and took a deep breath. Not long after, the atmosphere in the school social circle began to grow subtle. Linda, to regain face from my questioning in the club lounge earlier, started stoking the hype across major social platforms. She publicly posted a refined invitation, announcing she would participate as a co-sponsor in the annual charity gala hosted by the local top social elite. Moreover, in the post she boasted loudly, claiming that on the night of the banquet she would personally drive the limited edition Koenigsegg that had just been airlifted to the port onto the red carpet, showing off the aura of a top-tier heiress. The news caused quite a stir on campus. Many who were initially skeptical began wavering again when they saw how grand she was. That afternoon, I was in the independent study room on the top floor of the library, organizing the quarterly financial statements for the family trust, when the door was suddenly pushed open. Linda walked in an outfit of branded clothes, wearing an almost obsequious, hypocritical smile, and casually set a cup of expensive cold brew coffee on my desk. "Chloe, I wasn't polite to you in the lounge earlier. Don't take it personally." She walked over and sat down beside me, her tone full of familiarity and affection. "We're all good friends here. There's no need to sour the mood over a minor matter, right?" I didn't lift my head, still staring at the data on the computer screen, my voice as cold as ice. "Say what you want." "I'm short on time." Linda's eyes twitched, a hint of a menacing gleam flashing across them, but it was quickly covered by her smile. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "Here's the thing, the charity banquet is this weekend. The car I mentioned to you before, due to some delays with customs clearance, might be ready for pickup 2 days late. Look, could you lend me your titanium silver car for a day? Don't worry, I'll only make an appearance on the red carpet and I won't scratch the slightest bit of paint. After the banquet is over, I'll return it to you immediately and refuel it." In the previous life, she used exactly the same trick, using the so-called customs delay as an excuse to push hard for my car keys. Then she drove my car to spectacular effect at the banquet, attracting countless unsuspecting rich businessmen to invest in her fictitious business project. I slowly turned my head and looked coldly at the face full of longing and calculation. "Lending the car?" I mouthed with a hint of a sardonic smile. "Linda, that's a multi-million-dollar limited top hypercar. Do you think, given our current relationship, I would casually lend out an asset of this level?" Linda's face changed, and she hurriedly said, "We're best friends. Besides, my dad's project is about to pay back soon. Can I pay you rent by the day? $10,000 a day. Chloe, this banquet is really important to me, and as long as you help me this favor, my resources will be yours in St. Jacob." Watching her struggle, I smirked inwardly. I didn't refuse outright, but instead gave a half-smirk. "Rent by the day? It sounds reasonably sincere. But this car just finished a track maintenance, and according to procedure, it must be sent back to the factory's designated facility for routine system checks and software upgrades. I can leave the keys with you for now, but the delivery time depends on when the inspection report comes out." Saying this, I pulled out a key fob with a unique emblem from my bag and placed it on the desk. Linda's eyes lit up instantly, and she stretched out a hand to grab the keys. In her eyes, once she had the keys, she would have the passport to the pinnacle of high society. "Calm down." I reached out to hold the keys and spoke calmly. "The maintenance procedure won't be completed until Saturday afternoon at the earliest." On Saturday evening, I will have the trailer drive the car directly to the backstage reserve area at the banquet site. If the inspection proves clean at that time, you will naturally be able to take the car. Although Linda was somewhat unhappy about not being able to take the car in advance, when she saw the keys right in front of her and thought she could salvage face at the banquet, she nodded repeatedly, "Okay. It's settled then. Saturday evening, you must not slip up." She left with the hope I had deliberately left for her, unaware that she had already stepped into a dead end. The moment she left the library, I immediately dialed a member of the Charity Banquet Organizing Committee's steering committee. "Hello, I'm Chloe." My voice carried no emotion. "I hear your committee recently received a $50,000 charitable pledge from a company under Linda's name? I suggest you immediately conduct a secondary compliance check on the source of funds for that account. From the clues I have, the account involves multiple high-risk cross-border short-term loans, and the funding chain is extremely unstable. If this money were to be reversed or frozen in court on the banquet day, it could severely affect your organization's public reputation." The chairman of the British Museum's board of directors on the other end of the line immediately became serious. "Miss Chloe, thank you for your important reminder. We will immediately initiate emergency risk control procedures and subject the performance capability of that pledge to strict inquiry." On Saturday evening, the charity gala that the local socialite circle had been eagerly awaiting kicked off in front of the city's most luxurious grand theater on the red carpet. The spotlight was relentless, and long telephoto lenses densely tracked the slow arrival of the various luxury cars. Linda stood anxiously in the VIP lounge at the red carpet entrance, pacing back and forth. She wore a borrowed haute couture evening gown, with meticulous makeup, yet her underlying panic showed in her eyes. With less than 20 minutes until the red carpet segment, she anticipated that a titanium silver Koenigsegg delivered by tow truck would appear, but there was still no sign. "Chloe, what on earth is she up to?" She gritted her teeth and dialed my number, but all she heard was the cold system beeping. She had no idea that I was actually sitting in the back seat of a black Maybach not far from the red carpet, holding a champagne flute in my hand, watching her every move coldly through the surveillance feeds. The so-called Koenigsegg had never left my private underground garage from the start. The key I gave her was nothing but a meaningless metal ornament. As the red carpet hosts started calling her name, journalists and celebrities around began to murmur. Linda's vanity completely overwhelmed her rationality. She would never walk onto the red carpet on her own, nor admit that she did not actually own a top-tier supercar. With no other options, she bolted from the lounge in a panic and charged toward a black sports car among the surrounding convoy, an under-equipped, older McLaren that she had temporarily rented at a premium from a shady underground dealer. To create hype, she even had the rental company temporarily affix a forged exclusive license plate. The roaring engine sounded, and the black McLaren lurched onto the red carpet. Linda rolled down the window, striving to maintain an elegant smile as she waved to the media on both sides. Yet before she could break to a stop, veteran car critic Mark, who had been waiting outside the red carpet, walked up with a microphone. Mark was a special guest I had invited in advance through the Family Foundation, famous for his sharp tongue and rigor within the industry. "Please hold on a moment, Miss Linda." Mark's voice rang through the live venue speakers across the theater plaza. As tonight's guest car critic, I must point out several very interesting details. The car you're driving is publicly claimed to be a limited edition custom supercar under your family's name, but judging by the engine's vibration frequency, the casting process of the wheel hubs, and the post-finish serial number on the C-pillar, this appears to be nothing more than a secretly modified second-hand entry-level rental car, with insurance that just expired last month. The entire venue erupted in astonishment. The flashbulbs went wild, and reporters' cameras nearly pressed against Linda's face. Her complexion drained white in an instant. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, cold sweat breaking out on her forehead, and she screamed, "Nonsense! Who are you? How dare you slander our family's assets? My top-tier supercar was lent by my best friend Chloe to attend a track day, and I'm only driving this car to stage a show. Real car enthusiasts know how rich my family is. She attempted to cast blame onto me again, to create the illusion that I had usurped her resources, thereby salvaging a shred of face. However, before her words faded, the giant LED screen on the exterior wall of the theater suddenly switched to a new scene, an incredibly clear ultra-high-definition recording and live footage. In the clip, it was the whole process from 2 days earlier, in the library study room, where Linda pleaded with me to lend her a car and even promised to pay a daily rent of $100,000. The sound of her line in the recording, "The car I mentioned to you earlier is experiencing a slight delay in customs clearance," echoed clearly in the ears of everyone present. Along with the recording, there was also a scanned copy of a genuine title deed issued by the New York Jurat office, clearly printed with my full name and the unique VIN of that titanium silver Koenigsegg. Everyone, look at the big screen. Oh my God, that limited supercar is obviously Chloe's private property. Linda has actually been pretending to be a rich heir by renting cars the whole time, and she's turning the blame on someone else for lending her the car? This is shameless. Faking an identity to attend a charity banquet, this is the biggest scandal in high society. The crowd's chatter swelled like a tide, drowning Linda. Under the blinding white flash of the cameras, Linda trembled and covered her face, collapsing helplessly into the driver's seat, like a nakedly exposed clown, completely exposed to everyone's ridicule and contempt. I opened the Maybach's door, gracefully stepped out, and, under the protection of my bodyguard, walked onto the red carpet. As I passed that dilapidated McLaren, I paused and looked down at the trembling Linda inside the car. Linda, a fortress built of lies, when it collapses, isn't it going to fall faster than you imagine? I leaned down and, in a voice that only the two of us could hear, whispered this sentence to her. The scandal at the charity dinner erupted like a storm, quickly blazing through the local top-tier social circle. Linda's fake wealth identity was completely exposed, and the followers who once surrounded her vanished in an instant. Even several business sponsors she had previously tried to approach sent letters from lawyers demanding that she return the prepayments and compensate for reputational damages. But the desperate wretch is often the most ferocious. Wednesday afternoon, the St. James College Study Group lounge was empty. I placed the spare key to my private car in the lounge's storage cabinet and deliberately and unintentionally revealed this information during a call with the family legal team. That titanium silver Koenigsegg was currently parked in the Academy's VIP underground parking lot, and I would be heading to the administrative building for an academic meeting in half an hour. Linda, hiding in the adjacent changing room, saw everything clearly. When my footsteps leaving the lounge faded away, she could no longer wait and slipped in, pried open the cabinet, and firmly clenched the spare key to the supercar with its cold, metallic gleam in her hand. Her eyes were full of pathological frenzy and hatred, as if merely sitting in that car would let her reclaim everything she had lost. Several minutes later, the underground parking lot behind the Academy roared with the signature V8 twin-turbo engine of the Koenigsegg. Linda drove this multi-million-dollar titanium silver supercar, stepping on the accelerator and tearing out of the campus. She showed no concern at all and drove straight to the city's most exclusive private club enclave, the Cloud Peak Manor. There, a private gathering was underway that attracted many investment magnates and old families. She intended to go all in, to take advantage of the still-spreading news, to flaunt this truly top-tier supercar at the gathering, fabricating the illusion of shared ownership or deep connection with the car owner, and to lure in new funding pools to fill her nearly fractured cash flow. On the manor's lawn at Cloud Peak Manor, as soon as the titanium silver Koenigsegg appeared, it immediately drew all eyes. Linda, in high heels, elegantly stepped out of the car, adopting a poised and aloof attitude, smiling as she greeted the surrounding socialites and reporters, even reaching out to touch the body of the car, telling everyone about her unbreakable bond with the vehicle. She was immersed in the unreal halo, completely unaware that the net of crisis had already tightened behind the scenes. Even in the first moment, she privately took the key and started the vehicle. The car's network security system on my phone had already received an unauthorized alert. But I did not immediately cut off the fuel or power remotely, nor did I intervene on the spot. Because what I wanted was not a petty fight over words, but to completely trap her in an inescapable legal net. Is this the police station? I want to report a case. I sat in the administrative building's office, speaking calmly as I connected to the police. I own a Koenigsegg supercar registered under number 01, which was illegally stolen a few minutes ago in the St. James College underground parking lot. The vehicle is valued at approximately $12 million US, and current pinpointing shows it is located at Cloud Peak Manor's private club. After hanging up with the police, I proceeded to call the International Top-Tier Supercar Club and the Chief Risk Officer for Allianz Insurance Asia Pacific. This is Chloe. My exclusive vehicle has been illegally invaded and driven. Please immediately initiate the top-tier asset protection and pursuit program. At the same time, place this car on the global blacklist for improper use. 3 instructions, tightly linked, directly cutting off all of Linda's possible exits. And at this moment, on the lawn of Yunding Manor, Linda was still grandly boasting to a few venture capitalists about her fictional new energy supercar R&D project. Suddenly, a piercing siren shattered the tranquility of the estate. Several police cars roared in, cutting off all exits around the lawn. Then, a number of black business cars bearing signs of insurance risk control and forensic appraisal quickly parked nearby. Dozens of officers in uniform and legal staff strode toward the titanium silver supercar, and the lead senior inspector produced his badge, his gaze coldly sweeping Linda standing by the car. Miss Linda. We have received a formal report from the car owner, Miss Chloe, accusing you of stealing an extremely expensive private property valued at over $10 million USD and of unlawful possession and driving. Please put down the car keys immediately and cooperate with us for questioning. The gathering gasped in shock. All the socialites and reporters whipped out their mobile lenses, aimed squarely at Linda in the center of the lawn. Linda's smile stiffened in an instant, her high-heeled glass shattering on the floor into fragments. You're mistaken. This is impossible. She screamed in panic, her voice filled with incredible fear. This is a private loan between Chloe and me. I'm her best friend. I just drove here for our party. On what basis do you accuse me of theft? Borrowed? The inspector sneered, pulling out his handheld enforcement terminal. The car owner has provided complete garage surveillance footage and proof of ownership, clearly stating that no written permit or authorization was provided to you. At the same time, the insurance company has defined this act as a major asset theft risk. Please come with us. Cool metal handcuffs glittered blindingly under the sun, and in front of the city's social elites, they were snapped onto Linda's wrist, which wore expensive jewelry. The flashbulbs burst like a storm as Linda was forcibly escorted into the police car, under the eyes of the city's elites in contempt and disdain. From the car window, she could clearly see me slowly stepping out of a parked Maybach, my gaze cold as I looked down at her. The shrill wail of the police car siren shattered the quiet above the city and crushed Linda's pretend-rich dream to powder. In the first hour back at the station, she maintained her stubbornness, sat on the iron chair in the interrogation room, arrogant and shouting, claiming it was only a misunderstanding between best friends, and that the PR team behind her would soon get her bailed out. However, she didn't know that this was not merely a simple theft case, but a carefully laid trap I had personally set. 2 hours later, Linda's father and Eric, the longtime underground operator behind her fake wealth packaging who illicitly siphons funds from private citizens, arrived at the police station with several lawyers, bustling and urgent. To help Linda escape culpability and avoid criminal charges running into tens of millions of dollars, Eric quickly produced a yellowed sheet of paper stamped with a notary mark, an agreement. Officer, this is purely malicious retaliation, the lawyer stated firmly, handing the document to the investigators. This is Miss Chloe's private vehicle sharing agreement with my client Linda signed 6 months ago. The agreement clearly grants Linda the unpaid use of the vehicle. My client merely fulfilled the agreement. Where is the theft? Standing before the interrogation room's monitoring window, I watched Eric's face, calculating and lucky. In the previous life, they used this kind of forged document and vague private agreement to reverse the blame onto me, labeling me as the one who breached unilaterally, even tricking my family's trust into a huge security deposit. This time, I would not give them any chance to pull tricks. I pushed open the door to the interrogation room and entered gracefully, accompanied by our family's chief legal officer and top forensic expert, Frank. Frank opened the briefcase and slammed a thick stack of original documents onto the table. Mr. Eric, the so-called shared agreement you produced bears signatures whose ink and paper fiber aging do not match at all. Frank's voice was cold, every word sharp like a blade. 5 minutes ago we filed the highest-level forensic report with the court. The results show that the signatures on this agreement were forged with an electronic signature that my client signed 3 years ago in a school signing roster, produced by high-precision laser printing. The print time was yesterday afternoon. With that, Eric's face changed at once, and beads of cold sweat surfaced on his forehead. Moreover, I stepped forward, looking down at Linda, who was ashen-faced, in a tone so calm it was chilling. This Koenigsegg was equipped at factory with a military-grade blockchain encryption positioning system and a driver biometric module. All startup records and key matching data were real-time synchronized to the Sweden headquarters and the International Judicial Ledger. Your forged agreement, in the face of this blockchain's ironclad evidence, is nothing but waste paper. Linda suddenly raised her head, disbelief and panic in her eyes. Impossible. This can't be. Chloe, why are you doing this to me? We were once the best of friends. Friends? I sneered, my gaze devoid of any warmth. The moment you took the key, you weren't borrowing a car, you were gambling with my tolerance. Unfortunately, you lost. Frank then pulled out a second document from his briefcase and handed it directly to the on-site investigators. Officer, my client refuses any form of mediation and demands formal additional charges. Defendant Linda and her behind-the-scenes mastermind Eric are suspected of forging business documents, large-scale property theft and attempted, and maliciously fabricating evidence to frame others. We request cancel all their bail qualifications and seize all associated accounts under their name. After the police officers checked the blockchain evidence and forensic reports, their attitude instantly became extremely serious. The investigating officers slammed the table and sternly shouted, falsifying evidence, extremely malicious in nature. Immediately transfer the suspect to the detention center for detention pending prosecution. Hearing the word detention center, Linda completely collapsed. She screamed, trying to grab Eric's sleeve, but he coldly shrugged her off. Eric, in order to protect himself, even stated on the spot that it had nothing to do with Linda's personal actions. Eric! You can't just abandon me. You made me do this. Linda cried out in despair in the corridor as she was being escorted away, her voice echoing down the icy corridor. Watching her being handcuffed and dragged deeper into the detention center, I let out a slow sigh. Due to the unscrupulous behind-the-scenes team exhausting all means on her bail request and financial accommodation, 3 days later, Linda was temporarily released on bail. However, the moment she stepped out of the detention center, what awaited her was not a reunion and redemption, but a world that had completely collapsed. The rich second generation who used to toast with her at parties now blacklisted her as if she were a plague. Several investment firms that she had previously deceived with fictitious projects into prepayments joined forces to sue in court, demanding the freezing of all assets under her name. Her already precarious pseudo-aristocratic persona shattered into pieces in the sunlight. Desperate, Linda decided to unleash one last crazy counterattack. On Friday night, countless exposé posts suddenly flooded all major social platforms. Water Army accounts and marketing accounts swarmed like carp marching across the river, releasing large-amount videos edited with malice and forged chat screenshots. In these scandals, I was portrayed as a cold-blooded villain who bullied classmates with family power and even monopolized a trust fund through improper means. Even several core-listed companies under my family business were affected by this wave of public opinion. Discussions questioning corporate governance and moral risk filled the stock forums, and their market value showed obvious fluctuations in pre-market trading. I sat in the study of the manor, looking at the rumors spreading wildly on the big screen, but my face showed no trace of panic, instead a cold smile lifted at the corners of my mouth. In the last life, she used the same tactic of public opinion violence, aided by a black-hearted brokerage to completely ruin my reputation, making me a figure of public contempt. This time, she dares to repeat the same tricks. Miss Chloe. All Water Army IPs and the money flow paths have been locked down. Standing beside me, the cybersecurity expert David pushed a highly detailed data analysis report to me. The other party is very sly, using dozens of overseas virtual nodes and encrypted cryptocurrency transactions on the dark web for settlements. But they have underestimated our family's control over digital security and communication protocols. David tapped a few keys, and a remarkably clear graph immediately appeared on the screen. This is all the communication records of Linda and her behind-the-scenes PR company within the past 48 hours. David's voice carried a hint of sarcasm. There are not only voice clips of her personally narrating the black material, but also a blockchain transaction hash showing her transferring $50,000 to the head of the Water Army through overseas accounts. There are telephone recordings of her discussing how to spread rumors to force you to drop the lawsuit. I raised the red wine glass, gently swaying the ice and liquid. Very well. She thinks the online frenzy is her lifeline, but she doesn't know that every single record of her manufactured rumors is weaving a noose she has woven herself. Shall we contact the platforms to remove these rumors immediately? David asked. Remove them? No. My eyes turned cold, my tone as cold as ice. If we remove them, the frenzy ends. Let the bullets fly a little longer. When this wave of public opinion peaks and all the observers with blind faith are completely immersed in the justice of the aristocracy, we will smash the truth down. Only when you fly high enough will you crash shatter. Not only that, I expanded the scope of the network security surveillance even further. As I expected, Linda publicly boasted in the Black PR group, as long as we ruin Chloe's reputation and cause her family's stock price to plummet, her family's board will, to quell the scandal, force her to drop the charges against me for theft. Then I won't have to go to jail, and I can also sue for a huge amount of compensation for reputational damages. Listening to Linda's triumphant, almost frenzied laughter in the encrypted call records, I wore the deepest mockery at the corner of my mouth. She underestimates me and my family behind me. She thinks this is just an ordinary mudslinging battle, but she has no idea that from the first second she hired Black PR, every account taking on orders and every bit of funds drawn have been under our strict surveillance and reverse tracking. David, compile all the evidence overnight into an unalterable legal evidence chain, and copy the Cybersecurity Bureau and the Industry and Commerce Inspection Department. I put down my wine glass, stood up, and looked out at the inky night outside the window. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. we will deliver to this self-styled operator a gift she will remember for life. At exactly 10 in the morning, the press conference hall of the city's top 5-star hotel in the heart of the city was packed. Dozens of mainstream media outlets, financial reporters, and invited online influencers crowded the scene, cameras and flashbulbs weaving into a blinding white glare. Over the past 3 days, the negative rumors about me on the internet had swelled to a peak. Countless netizens were waving banners of justice on their keyboards, pushing me onto the spotlight, and even the stock price of the family business faced indiscriminate attacks. Meanwhile, Linda sat in a private cafe in the city center, scrolling through the flood of online dirt on her phone, a sickly satisfied smile playing on her face. She firmly believed that this self-directed public relations storm would force me and my family to yield. However, what awaited her was not my concession, but a complete, uncompromising destruction. I wore a sharply tailored black haute couture suit, accompanied by our family's chief legal officer Frank and cybersecurity expert David, and calmly walked up to the podium at the press conference. Facing the multitude of scrutinizing and hostile cameras in the audience, I did not even offer a polite opening remark, only nodding slightly to signal the backstage to turn on the enormous electronic display. Dear media friends, and all the followers before the screens. My voice carried through the microphone, cool and steady, exuding an undeniable authority regarding the so-called elite bullying and asset fabrication rumors that have spread across the internet in the past few days. I stand here today to show you one thing, only the truth. As soon as the words fell, the big screen lit up. The first thing displayed was not text, but a set of extremely clear topological maps of financial flows. Dozens of accounts that posted rumors were clearly labeled, and behind them the corresponding funds traced and converged to the same offshore crypto account. And at the next level beneath that crypto account, Linda's real identification documents and her own bank transfer receipts were clearly shown. The room fell into dead silence, quickly followed by a roaring uproar. Oh my gosh! Those dirt about me were funded by Linda herself to hire trolls and bad PR to spread rumors? Look at the transfer times, right the day after she was released on bail. This is blaming the thief for crying out loud? Faking an elite background and getting exposed, and she's still paying to smear the plaintiff? Without giving the audience time to react or ask questions, I gently pressed the remote, and the second set of evidence played on the big screen, the footage of a high-definition phone recording, with accompanying voice-to-text transcription slices. As long as we ruin Chloe's reputation and drive her family's stock price down, her family's board will, to quell the scandal, force her to drop the charge against me for theft. Then I won't go to prison, and I'll even be able to sue for a huge amount in damages for misrepresentation and reputation. Linda's sharp, deranged, and calculating voice throbbed through the conference's top-tier audio system, shocking every nerve in the room. Every detail of her discussions with the PR head about fabricating screenshots of conversations, buying trending positions, and employing trolls to control reviews was laid bare under the gaze of every camera. The reporters in the audience hammered away at their keyboards, flashbulbs pinged like lightning, and every shot meticulously recorded irrefutable evidence on screen. Those netizens who once stood on moral high ground to denounce me were now mocking themselves, and their fury, rushed by the ticking seconds, was unleashed upon Linda. Sitting in the cafe, Linda watched the complete set of evidence playing on the live stream, and the coffee cup in her hand clattered to the ground, shattering into pieces. She trembled violently all over, her face as pale as paper, and a despair and panic never seen before finally emerged in her eyes. Her pride, the public opinion counterattack, had become a noose that directly hurled her into an endless abyss. Besides clarifying the facts, I also have a few announcements to make. I stood at the podium, eyes like a blazing torch, looking down at the camera with an authoritative edge. First, I have formally filed a criminal complaint with the judicial authorities, accusing Linda and her behind-the-scenes group of seriously damaging commercial reputation and product reputation, as well as malicious libel. Second, my family's legal team has applied for asset preservation with the court, seizing and freezing all illegal transfer assets under Linda and her associated companies, demanding her to bear enormous damages for loss of reputation. Frank stepped forward at that moment and held up the court-issued formal stalemate order in front of the camera. The order has taken effect 5 minutes ago. All bank accounts, real estate, and investment interests currently under the defendant Linda have been legally frozen. At the same time, given that she has committed illegal acts again during bail review, we have officially applied to the Procuratorate to revoke her bail eligibility. The mood at the press conference reached its climax. I stood on the stage, looking at the chaotic media below, with a cold smile at the corner of my mouth. Within a few hours after the press conference ended, the public opinion direction underwent a disruptive reversal. On major social platforms, the hot searches that had accused me evaporated in an instant, replaced by nationwide condemnation and derision of Linda and her behind-the-scenes gang. The extreme panic was not only Linda herself but also the heartless trading gang behind her, who had been trying to exploit her as a fake gold signboard to make a quick profit. This trading gang led by Eric secretly ran a so-called cross-border capital incubator. On the surface they provided asset custody and ultra-luxury social packaging for a tiny group of top heirs, but behind the scenes they used these forged aristocratic backgrounds to illegally siphon tens of millions of private capital within private financial circles, engaging in high-risk funding, borrowing, and illegal money laundering. Now, Linda's complete downfall and her assets being frozen by law have struck a heavy meteorite that smashed through their fragile funding chain. Late at night, in a secluded private club's basement in the suburbs, the atmosphere was suffocatingly oppressive. Eric, his face somber, shattered the crystal wine glass and cursed, "Idiot. A hopeless idiot. Let her handle a minor PR crisis to buy time," and she actually exposed the transfer records and recordings to the other party. "Eric bro, what do we do now?" The core members watching the computer screens, where linked accounts were being consecutively frozen, looked panicked. Chloe's legal team and the judicial investigations are moving too fast. They've not only frozen Linda's personal cards, but also all of our shadow shell companies used for money laundering have been put on the high-risk monitoring list. The court's freezing order could be issued to our core fund pool accounts at any moment. A wicked and resolute light flashed in Eric's eyes. "We can't delay any longer. That stupid woman is already dead to us. Keeping her around will only drag us all down." cut off all contact with Linda immediately and sever all debt obligations under her name by turning them into false evidence. Also, activate the third emergency plan, transfer the remaining $80 million in the accounts to offshore accounts via offshore encrypted channels before midnight tonight. In his plan, as long as they could move this enormous sum offshore before the judicial freezing order fully takes effect, they could reinvent themselves abroad, assume new identities, and resume their old tricks, leaving all criminal responsibility and enormous debts to Linda, who was being held in custody. However, they had no idea that every move and every secret had already been exposed under my vast monitoring network. In the matters study, I and Arthur, the chief expert in financial risk control of the family, sat before a softly flickering computer cluster. "Miss Chloe, the prediction is completely accurate." Arthur reached out, tapping lightly on the dense topology of cash flow on the screen. "Eric's gang is attempting to use first shell companies based in the Virgin Islands, employing high-frequency, small amount transfers to peel off $80 million from their core fund pool. They're trying to exploit the time difference in late-night settlements by cross-border banks to evade local court investigations." I leaned back in the leather chair, my long fingers rhythmic on the table, with a cool sneer at the corner of my mouth. "Last life, they used the same offshore transfer technique to drain me dry and quickly vanish abroad, making me bear billions in debt and even attempting to kill me. This time, they won't be able to take a single cent. We can initiate financial interception at any time." Arthur spoke rigorously. "Our family holds priority risk control veto rights in 3 core settlement banks. As long as we submit their supplemental hard evidence of alleged illegal money laundering and international financial fraud, these funds will be permanently frozen at the intermediary settlement node within 3 seconds. Then execute it." I calmly gave the order. "By the way, copy this evidence to Interpol and the Financial Crimes Investigation Bureau as well." At midnight, the clock struck 12. In the basement of a private club, Eric stared intently at the progress bar representing the fund's transfer progress percentage on the screen. 80%. 90%. 99%. Just as a hint of a grim smile of relief appeared at the corner of his mouth, the entire computer screen suddenly turned into a blinding crimson red. "Warning! The transaction has been forcibly terminated by the system. All related accounts have been permanently frozen by the International Financial Risk Control Center and the judicial authorities due to suspected serious international financial fraud and illegal money laundering." How is this possible? Why is this happening? Eric crazily slammed the keyboard, his eyes nearly bulging from their sockets. Before they could recover from the immense despair of funds being frozen, there was a loud crash from the basement door. Several special law enforcement officers and financial police wearing heavy protective gear descended like thunder, charging into the room with overwhelming force, and the dark gun barrels immediately locked onto everyone present. "Everyone stay still. Hands up and down on your heads." The cold alarm and the sound of chambers being loaded echoed in the confined space. Eric's face turned ashen. He collapsed to the floor, knowing that his underground empire, his lifeblood, was completely destroyed. In the interrogation room, confronted with undeniable financial transaction records and $80 million in frozen funds, Eric completely collapsed. In an effort to seek a reduced sentence, he did not hesitate at all and revealed all the details of Linda's past actions, how she proactively helped them fake identities, how she used lies to deceive investors, and even how she planned to shift all blame to me after the incident, revealing every minor detail of the commercial fraud. This lengthy, multi-page confession was like a heavy iron hammer, completely shattering Linda's last shred of possible exoneration. With Eric and his gang fully confessing, the truth of the entire business fraud and money laundering case is laid bare. The police alert hit like a series of death sentences, driving Linda into a dead end. Under immense pressure, Linda, whose bail had already been revoked and who was under mandatory surveillance awaiting formal arrest, decided to take a desperate risk and make a final bid for life on the run. She used the last bit of counterfeit documents and secretly hidden cash, contacted an experienced underworld boss via the dark net, and planned to create a late-night car accident off a cliff to fake her death, then smuggle out of the country on a fake passport. However, her fragile pride and nearly pathological obsession led her to make the dumbest decision before fleeing. She wanted to see my crushing defeat with her own eyes to be willing to leave. At 11 o'clock at night, along the hillside road in the suburbs leading to the international airport, the darkness was as thick as spilled ink. This escape route exactly overlapped with the winding mountain road where I'd died in my previous life. Linda drove a black SUV with a forged license plate, weaving through the curves like a madwoman. Her hands on the steering wheel were slick with cold sweat, her eyes fixed straight ahead. According to her plan, the underworld boss would meet her 3 kilometers ahead at a cliff bend and push the car off the cliff to fake a devastating crash. But just as she entered the steepest successive S-curves, 2 dazzling aurora white beams suddenly lit up from ahead. A titanium-silver Koenigsegg lay like a sleeping steel behemoth across the narrow bend, blocking the entire road. The blinding high beams pierced the night, making Linda nearly unable to open her eyes. Linda slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching loudly on the ground as the car skidded dozens of meters and finally grounded to a halt a mere half a meter from my car's front end. I opened my door and gracefully stepped down from the Koenigsegg. The night wind fluttered my coat as I looked down at the already frightened Linda in the car, my eyes filled with mockery and cold indifference that betrayed nothing. Linda, in the last life, you took my life on this bend. I walked to her window, lightly tapping the glass, my tone terrifyingly calm. This life, do you think you can still escape from this road? Linda's pupils contracted violently, and she seemed struck by lightning. She didn't understand what I meant by the last life, but she could feel the fear penetrating to her bones. You. How can you be here? How did you know my route? She frantically pressed the car door's lock, screaming, eyes full of unfathomable terror. Every move you make, every underworld intermediary you contacted, even the counterfeit Palau passport in your possession, they're all under my control. I pulled out my phone and showed her real-time location on the screen. You think you're fleeing, but you're actually following a route I drew for you, step by step into the trap. Before I could finish speaking, the front and back ends of the mountain road suddenly rang with roaring police sirens. Several special ops armored vehicles and police cars roared in, their glaring red and blue lights turning the dark road into daylight. Police helicopters hovered overhead, shining powerful searchlights down, locking onto Linda's SUV. All personnel in the vehicle, listen up. You are surrounded by the police. Shut down the engine and get out immediately. Give up your futile struggle. The voice from the police loudspeaker echoed through the valley like a resounding bell. Linda completely collapsed. She watched the 10,000 supercars blocking the road ahead, the police surrounding her as tight as seals, and then glanced at the abyss beneath her beside her, and the whole person collapsed onto the driver's seat, letting out a desperate and piercing cry. Her desperate escape plan was but a ridiculous farce in the face of absolute strength and foresight. 2 SWAT officers wearing heavy ballistic armor rushed forward, tore open the car door, dragged Linda, whose face had turned deathly pale and her body was limp, out of the cabin, and pressed her hard to the ground. The cold handcuffs locked around her wrists once more. This time, there was no gap left for her to escape. As she was escorted past me, I bent down slightly and looked at her face, covered with mud and traces of tears. Your game is over, I whispered. A month later, in the first trial court, the atmosphere was so solemn that it seemed almost frozen. The spectator benches on both sides of the courtroom were packed with people. In addition to financial and legal reporters from dozens of top media outlets, there were sponsors who had been deceived by Linda with a fabricated background, socialites and celebrities she had exploited, and victims who had become puppets in online storms. Everyone's eyes were fixed firmly on the silhouette in the defendant's seat, dressed in prison garb and emaciated, as if a soulless husk. Yet in just over a month, the once invincible, arrogant, top young lady Linda had lost all glamour. Her face was deathly pale, her eyes were hollow, and she curled up deep behind the iron bars of the defendant's chair, like a lifeless shell. And I, as the main victim in this case and the plaintiff in the criminal incidental civil suit, sat at the front of the plaintiff's bench, wearing a tailored black haute couture suit. By my side was the city's top legal team, and piles of towering evidence on the table, ironclad proof that would drive Linda to a complete legal defeat and public disgrace. Call the witness. The judge struck the gavel, and a solemn tone echoed through the empty courtroom. The first to take the stand was Eric, the mastermind already handled in another case, wearing a yellow vest prisoner's uniform. To gain merit and a reduced sentence, Eric did not hesitate at all and admitted in court every detail of Linda's actions, how she proactively sought him out to forge asset certificates, how she used forged supercar ownership to defraud investors, and how after the incident she ordered him to hire online trolls to smear and discredit me. Your Honor, everything I say is absolutely true. Eric pointed at Linda, his voice cold. All the forged notarial certificates and loan agreements were directly instigated and signed by Linda. From start to finish, she was using a fictitious noble identity to conduct large-scale illegal fundraising. Next came the second and third witnesses in succession. Representatives of charities who had been swindled out of millions in advance payments, leaders of celebrity clubs who had used her name, and the Asia-Pacific Regional Risk Control Officer of an international supercar club all testified. Clear financial transfer records, irrefutable encrypted call recordings, and authoritative judicial appraisal reports issued by national institutions formed a windproof web of law, completely sealing off all of Linda's defenses. The defense attorney, looking at the irrefutable ironclad evidence on the stand, hung his head and sighed, unable to recite the prepared defense speech. Defendant Linda, do you have any objection to the charges brought by the prosecution, including the large-scale property theft attempts, forgery of business documents, illegal solicitation of public deposits, malicious defamation, and attempts to evade accountability? The judge loomed over the defendant's chair with a superior gaze. Linda trembled as she raised her head, her eyes empty as she looked around. She saw the investors she had once toyed with burning with rage in their eyes, the sneers of former aides, and finally her gaze fixed on me. I looked at her calmly, my eyes free of anger or pity, only a penetrating coldness that came from seeing through the cycles of life. In the previous life, she had forced me into a desperate situation on a winding mountain road, causing me to die with endless resentment. In this life, I stand on the absolute high ground of justice and morality, watching the lies she piled up devour her completely. I plead guilty. Linda finally broke down, covering her face with both hands and emitting a desperate, pitiful sob from the defendant's chair. The sobs echoed through the solemn courtroom, but they could not elicit any sympathy from anyone. The judge struck the gavel again, and everyone rose. The court believes that the defendant Linda committed the crimes with clear facts, convincing evidence, extremely nature, great social harm, and even during the bail period attempted to evade legal sanctions through illegal means without any remorse. The gavel struck heavily, producing a dull yet shocking sound. The judgment is as follows: the defendant Linda is guilty of theft, commercial fraud, malicious defamation, and illegal absorption of public deposits. A consolidated punishment for multiple crimes is imposed, a sentence of 18 years imprisonment, and a fine of $5 million. All illegal gains under her name shall be confiscated. At the same time, the defendant must compensate the plaintiff Chloe for reputational damage and related economic losses totaling $400 million. 18 years in prison. Sky-high compensation. All illegal assets under her name to be liquidated. As soon as the pronouncement of the verdict was announced, the courtroom benches erupted in a tidal cheer and applause. The flashbulbs flashed wildly, recording this moment that filled everyone with immense relief. When Linda heard 18 years, her legs went weak, and she collapsed heavily to the ground, eyes filled with despair and deadened. Her brightest youth would be spent behind cold, hard walls. The wealth and status she once dreamed of would completely melt into a mirage. The bailiff stepped forward and forcibly picked up the limp Linda, escorting her toward the courtroom exit. As she passed the plaintiff's bench, she strained every last ounce of strength to turn her head and look at me, her voice hoarse beyond recognition. "Chloe, are you satisfied?" I slowly rose, straightened the lapel of my suit, and looked down at her from a commanding height, softly saying, "This isn't about whether I am satisfied, Linda. This is the law's ruling on you, and the price you must pay for your greed and malice." The first ray of dawn after the dust settles pierced through the clouds and fell onto the floor-to-ceiling windows of the top floor of St. Yakov Academy. As the court ruling formally took effect, the asset liquidation work for Linda and the mastermind group behind her was completed successfully. The fictional funds used as fraud chips, the illegally raised funds, and the enormous security deposits scanned from me through malicious lawsuits, were all liquidated and unfrozen in accordance with the meticulous review by judicial authorities and international financial regulators. I stood in the private study of the manor, watching the final asset report submitted by the family trust and the legal team, and gently signed my name. The tens of millions of dollars in unfrozen and compensatory funds were not used to fill my private account in any way. Instead, I transferred them all to my newly established Light of the Future Youth Entrepreneurship and Legal Aid Public Foundation. In a previous life, due to blind trust and ignorance, I became the lamb slaughtered at the hands of wicked people. In this life, I will not only cut off every hand that reaches for me but also use the funds liquidated from sin to provide a solid umbrella for more young people who struggle in the shadows, face injustice and fraud, but are powerless to resist. A press conference was held again, but this time there was no arrogant quarrel, no glaring scandals, only the respectful gazes of media all over the city. Ms. Chloe, may I ask what motivated you to invest this sky-high compensation entirely into a public foundation? A reporter in the crowd raised the microphone high. Facing the countless flashbulbs, I smiled with elegance and composure. The vanity-mired lies will ultimately be shattered by reality, and justice and conscience are the most unshakable top-tier wealth in this world. This fund will be specifically used to combat online defamation and financial fraud, and to provide compliant technical and legal support for young entrepreneurs. I hope everyone understands that grounded dignity shines far brighter than borrowed glory. After the press conference, I went alone to the private underground garage. The titanium silver Koenigsegg still sat quietly on the display stand, its cold metal body gleaming brilliantly under the soft light. The dangerous red glow that once flickered on the dashboard had long since faded, replaced by a pure and powerful mechanical beauty. I reached out, gently stroked the cold body, then opened the door and sat in the driver's seat. With a press of the ignition, the roaring engine sounded like a lion finally breaking free from its shackles, deafeningly echoing in the empty garage. It was no longer a death knell, but the prelude to rebirth. I stepped on the accelerator, and the titanium silver supercar shot off like a bolt of lightning, roaring out of the dim underground garage and charging toward the outside world bathed in sunshine, vast and boundless. All the gloom, betrayal, and blood-soaked feuds had been thoroughly crushed behind me along with the nightmares of my past life. I would no longer be the weak, easily bullied puppet, but the true heir who controls my own fate and is invincible. The broad road ahead lies ahead, the sun shines for miles. The wonderful life that belongs to me has only just begun. Outside, in the local maximum security female prison on the third month after the court verdict. After passing through 3 heavy iron doors and a cold sensor corridor, I sat in front of the glass wall in the visiting room. On the other side, Linda wore a loose, dull prison uniform, hands cuffed, as 2 guards escorted her to sit down with difficulty. In just 90 days, the former campus belle who once wore haute couture dresses at St. Jacob Academy held a high-legged glass under the spotlight, now pale-faced and gaunt, her once well-kept hair cut into a short ear-length style, the ends dry and brittle. Her gaze no longer carried the arrogance and calculation of the past, only a deadpan numbness and fear. She trembled as she picked up the microphone, her voice dry as sun-dried gravel. You came to see me for a joke, right, Chloe? I watched her quietly, my expression as calm as observing a stranger. I reached for the microphone in front of me, my tone devoid of warmth. I'm not that free, Linda. Today's visit is only to sign off on the final judicial settlement documents. All the real estate you had that had been moved through fake pledges or illegally transferred to distant relatives' accounts, and the privately hidden jewelry, were all seized by the Judicial Inspection Department last week, packed, and auctioned. Linda's pupils contracted violently, her face turning deathly pale. She pressed herself against the glass, eyes red, her emotions spiraling out of control as she screamed, "Why? That was my last backup plan. That was the money I saved for my parents' old age. Chloe, you've sent me here for 18 years already. You forced Eric to hand down a life sentence, ruined my life completely. Why do you want to annihilate me?" Annihilate? I smiled and leaned slightly, looking down at her frantic state through the bulletproof glass. When you forged borrowing agreements, had black PR manipulate my family business's stock price, even planned to drive me off a mountain on a winding road, did you ever think of leaving me a path to retreat? Hearing the words "on a winding mountain road," Linda shuddered violently. A fear that cannot be described appeared in the depths of her eyes. She still cannot understand why every one of her secret plans I could anticipate. Why my gaze at her felt like a god who already knew the fate awaiting her. What kind of monster are you, really? Her voice trembled, tears mixed with dust leaving dirty marks on her face. You'd planned everything long ago. From the moment I posted that photo of the supercar in the lounge, you've been leading me into it, right? You wanted me dead. No, it wasn't me drawing you in, it was your endless greed and vanity. My tone was cold, each word piercing the heart. I'm just standing there, watching you take the fake key and walk step by step onto the gallows you built yourself. I placed a donation certificate that had just been organized by the legal team against the glass. It clearly showed that from the last $7 million of assets lawfully seized and auctioned in her name, all had been liquidated into the Victim Special Compensation Fund and Fraud Prevention Public Welfare Projects. See this? I calmly retrieved the document. All the splendor and wealth you deceived for are now atoning for your sins. And in the next over 6,000 days, you'll have to taste every moment of the evil you planted in this place without haute couture, without supercars roaring, without the spotlight. A guard stepped forward and restrained the completely collapsing, wildly beating Linda against the glass. Let me out! Chloe! I know I was wrong. Help me. Please, help me. I don't want to spend 18 years here. Linda's piercing cries and pleas echoed in the small reception room, handcuffs clinking against the bulletproof glass with a harsh, dull sound. I didn't spare her another glance, slowly hung up the phone, gracefully stood up, turned around, and strode out. Behind me, the heavy clang of the metal heavy door sealing shut completely separated all the screams and despair inside the iron window. Once outside the prison gates, the morning sun shone on me, bringing a long-missed warmth. I pulled open the door of the titanium silver Koenigsegg parked by the curb, sat in the driver's seat, and started the engine. The furious roar echoed across the vacant square, like a proclamation that cleanses of all pretensions. The blood feud of the past life and the thunderbolt retaliation of this life finally drew the most perfect close at this moment. I stepped on the accelerator. The supercar sped like a silver streak into the sunlit national highway, casting that cold confinement far behind in the rearview mirror. My era has dawned.